Two offensive linemen, two safeties, and a star slot receiver highlight today's Florida High School football recruiting countdown.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into The Portal, where you get your daily recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal information. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst, and thank you for making The Portal your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Right now, you can download the app and get $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Today's show is going to be one that features two linemen, two safeties, and a slot receiver. I'm down to number 30 through 26 on the countdown, and we'll finish up by the end of the weekend. And this is one of the more interesting ones for me personally, because I've seen all these kids live except for one kid, and he's on my bucket list to see this fall. And we'll talk about him in a moment. But the first player is somebody that is the brother of an NFL big-time defensive back, a kid that plays at an elite high school, a kid that has all kinds of physical traits that you're like, this is what it's supposed to look like. Speed, length, size, all of it. How do you adjust when you look at a kid like this from saying, okay, you got to take away the fact, okay, you know the bloodlines. How do you grade this kid? It's a little bit harder because you want to give him the edge based on what's going on. That's Justice Fitzpatrick, plays at St. Thomas Aquinas down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And he is a young man that has a burst that is not normal for a kid that's probably going to end up playing safety. He could play corner, but I think he'll be better off at safety, because he closes on the ball and goes downhill so well, and he's so physical. The way he plays, I think long-term, again, it's best for him to play safety. Maybe it is corner, but this is an athlete regardless. He's going to play in the secondary and make a mark somewhere. Justice is 6'1". He's one of those kids that just looks like a player that you would want first off the bus, and he's also a guy that plays hard on each down. If you're going to play for Roger Harriet at STA, you're going to have to be that way anyway. He's going to demand the most out of you and ask for excellence, not just great. To that end, I saw Fitzpatrick play at the Battle Miami tournament, and I didn't really know what to expect. He played slot, he played safety, etc. Played in different areas depending on how the other team lined up. And the one thing that I kept coming back to with him is how he would break on the football, whether it was his man that he was covering that got the ball, or if he came off that player and the ball was delivered to another receiver in the route. His ability to change direction out of his back pedal was really good, but he was still best when he went towards the line of scrimmage. Again, that's why I like him long-term better at safety. Not saying he can't play corner, but that mentality usually helps out in the run game and the screen game, and safeties and nickels really have to do that. So we'll see. As far as weight, I guess he's 185 pounds, something like that in that range. I didn't ask him when I was at the tournament, but as a listing for Fitzpatrick, it's 185 as well by one of the services. So I was probably pretty accurate, but these kids go up and down. I'm going to guess he's 205, 210 by the time he fills out. He still looked thin, even though he was over 180 pounds. And he looked like he was a guy that could add 15 pounds, no problem. By the time he leaves college 3-4 years from now, that's a totally different guy. So I love Justice Fitzpatrick in terms of his athleticism and his speed. And to that, he recently ran a 10.76. So electronic 10.76, you're moving. Visits Georgia May 30th, Miami June 6th, Texas June 13th, and a school to kind of watch with him because Deron Wilson's the new DB coach that's helping recruit him to the University of Florida, the Gators. He's probably going to visit there, but that's a newer situation. Don't know where he's going to go, but I mean, again, Georgia, Miami, Texas are some of his OBs. This is a really interesting kid that he could go to a lot of different places. Next up, it's a player that I saw last year, and I was told that he was going to blow up, and that definitely happened. That was at Miami Under Armour in 24. The player is Jasen Lopez. For those of you that clicked on this from YouTube, he's the guy that's on the picture, the thumbnail. He plays at Chaminade Madonna in South Florida, 5'11", 170, 175 pounds. Really, really good route runner. He takes to his craft and enjoys it. George, the receiver coach at Chaminade, like he told me about him. Like, I'm telling you, this guy's going to carve people up. He did it last year, and he did even more at this year's Miami Under Armour. And he did it last season, too. He had around 1,400 yards. So he's got it proven multiple years when everybody knew that he was coming for it, and he did it during the season as well. So it's one thing to do it at Under Armour, to do it Under Armour and during the season against the kind of competition that Chaminade plays. This is a guy that understands how to play the slot position. And to me, he should be in consideration for the nation's best slot. That's a position that some people don't really use. They just list everybody as a receiver. Slot is its own entity because you got to be able to carry the ball, reverses. You got to understand the screen game a little bit differently. And even as a blocker, you've got to be able to do things. Jasen's put together. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he's strong. I think he will be somebody that can help in the blocking department and be an all-around slot receiver. Now, could he play outside? Sure. I just think that he is so good in the slot, don't make it too complicated. If it's not broke, don't fix it. As far as recruiting goes, most people think he'll end up at Miami, but I'm not sure. Florida State's got an OB for June 13th. Pittsburgh, Kentucky, and several other schools are after him. Ironically, and Jasen and I talked about this at Miami Under Armour, the only school that he, off the top of his head, that he really didn't have an offer from that he kind of thought he would get, this a few weeks ago, but it was Syracuse, which they offered just about everybody in Florida. So that was a little surprising. But Miami, Florida State battle could be brewing. And if he does go out of state, that wouldn't shock me either. He was no place near ready to make a decision when I spoke with him. So we'll see where he goes. But Jasen Lopez is an excellent slot receiver. Next up, Samuel Roseboro. This is a big-bodied power offensive tackle or guard. He could play either one. It wouldn't even matter. Out of Clearwater High School, just on the other side of the bay from Tampa. Power, and more power. He hits people like a ton of bricks. His film is awesome, and he's got a pretty good pass set. He's a little more advanced, especially for Florida kids. Florida's not known for O-linemen, but Roseboro is a little more advanced than I've seen from some other kids. I'm curious to see where he ends up lining up, regardless of which school he gets into, and I'll mention some of his programs here in a moment. But he plays a lot of right tackle at Clearwater High, and I'm cool with that. Could he play left? He's got the feet to probably do it. Depends on the kind of situation he's in, how they use their linemen, but I think he has the athleticism to do it. Where I really think it would be interesting for him to be is at left or right guard, because on GT, on those counter plays and those gaps, just blocking down, he's so heavy-handed. That would be intriguing. Now, you can still do it as a tackle too, but you're going to get your hands on the bigger body guys a little bit more as an interior player. Maybe he plays both at the college level, and it depends on the circumstance. Like Ohio State's a possibility. He's probably not going to walk in and play left tackle at Ohio State. Okay, maybe they start him at guard. Bama, same thing. That's kind of a work your way up. I can see Roseboro being that guy. But again, whether it's guard or tackle, I like him in either scenario. Very heavy-handed, natural with his pass set, and he's an athlete. He's a guy that can bend. He's not a waist bender. He can get low, and he can anchor his feet into the ground, and it's hard, especially when he extends his arms. Really hard to get around him. You've got to take the fight to him, and even the really speedy edge rushers that I saw him go against, they didn't do very well. If you don't have good technique, Roseboro is going to hammer you more often than not. I mean, not just beat you on a rep, but he's really going to hammer you. When we come back, we got two more guys to talk about on today's countdown here on the Portal Podcast. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute tickets at unbeatable prices. Game Time Picks. Curation makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, anything else that you can think of, and it's also easy to do it. Checking on the Game Time app, it's one of the easiest apps you're ever going to use. I've used it several times, and there are amazing deals. They're curated for you, huge matchups wherever you go. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Now, the next guy up on the list is another really, really good football player, and he could probably play multiple spots himself. This is a circumstance where everybody wants to find the DBs that are versatile for today's game. If you don't, teams will find that one player in the secondary and they will pick on him over and over and over again, mitigating your talent at the other spots. Zach Fort out of IMG Academy. He's a kid from California originally. He's been at IMG for a few years now. He's currently committed to Georgia. Watch out for Notre Dame and other schools still trying to get him to come for an OB, but he is committed to Georgia. This is a kid that is really put together, understands the game from a mental standpoint far more than most kids his age, and he's a guy that just loves football. When you have a conversation with Fort, it's not like you're talking to somebody that's doing this because he should, and it's a free education and maybe a chance for some NIL. He actually likes to learn the game. He actually likes to train. He actually likes learning all the little techniques with defensive back training, which is really hard. And he does it each and every day. You don't go to IMG to get better. You go to IMG to try to be the best. Like, that's a really unique blend because you're away from home. You're going to an academy where you're basically a college student before you're old enough to drive in a lot of cases. Zach would be one of those. He took that on and has enjoyed it. He's been one of their leaders, and I think that's why he's one of the nation's best safeties. Here's the question I have that kind of going back to the original point. Does he end up playing safety only? Does he play nickel? Does he play both? And how will he be utilized, no matter if it's Georgia or somewhere else, on third downs in obvious passing situations? I could see an argument for him in many different ways. And it's probably one of the reasons his offer list is through the roof. Could have went to numerous programs. Could have been Florida State, could have been Ohio State, could have been a lot of different places. He's a guy that if a team's got a really good slot receiver, especially if it's one that has some power to him and can beat up on some smaller DBs, Fort at 195 pounds, that's what he's at right now, is a player that can take him on. If you want somebody to direct your defense, make sure everything's aligned, he's a really intelligent football player and he's very intuitive. That's a great idea too. So it depends on the defense, and it might even depend on the down and distance and who's on the field for the other team. Fort will be able to move around. That's really, really important in today's game. Finally, for today's countdown, a guy that I think has been underrated, and one of the reasons why is he's at Cardinal Mooney. It's a smaller school. It's at Sarasota, Florida. We are talking about Deron Parks. He is massive, 6'5", 345 pounds, and quite frankly, he doesn't look like the guy that could pass protect and play right tackle, let alone left tackle. But I saw him at Under Armour in Orlando, and he was tremendous. At pass protection, they had him at left for part of the time. He won an opportunity to go to the Under Armour All-American game based on his performance. Again, 345 pounds. He needs to reshape his body, and that's fine. But he has the athleticism to play guard or tackle. We'll see where he ends up. I don't know for sure, but right now, I just know he's a very good football player. He's kind of like Roseboro in the sense where it could start out at guard and maybe he ends up at tackle later on in his college career. Whatever happens, great kid, very good football talent. Auburn, May 30th. Penn State, June 6th. Kentucky, June 13th. Georgia recently offered. So did Georgia Tech. He's got a whole bunch of offers. We'll see if anybody else gets added to his official visit list. Watch out for Auburn right now with Deron Parks, though. That's a school that he really likes, and he just has a good relationship with their coaching staff. So we'll see how that goes. Thank you once again for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day to get all the latest recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal news. I'll be continuing on with my countdown through player number 1 in the state of Florida. We'll finish up by the end of Sunday. It's a lot of fun for me. I hope you like it as well. We're going to be talking about a whole bunch of different things coming up in regards to battles in recruiting because the official visits are pretty close to being lined up for most of the elite players. Which schools get them? Who do I think is in the best spot? That's coming up over the next few weeks. And the transfer portal, it opens again in April. We're not that far away from it. How well is your school situated right now as spring ball gets rolling? Do they need somebody else? I'm going to be going through a whole bunch of those things in the next couple of weeks and talking about positions and depth charts across the country. That is here on the Portal Podcast, and we will see you again soon. Take care.